The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghosts. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat above us. There will be a prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Friday, June 9th, Saturday, June 10th. If you're on the East Coast, I hope you had a great day, evening, and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on the top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are here 7 days a week. We welcome everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live on SpacedOutRadio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Horns up if you love our theme music, provided to us by the guitar god himself, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of SOR. If you're on social media, hit me up with a follow on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and Stitcher. Our website, once again, SpacedOutRadio.com. And if you go over to Patreon.com for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron of SOR as well. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on our website by clicking Listen Live, go on Revolution Radio, on Spreaker, on the UPRN chat room, or maybe you're one of the lucky ones, like Gail, who is a valued member of the SOR Space Travelers Club, or if you're on Twitter right now, be like Ron, be like Graviton Fish, and others, and use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio to connect with me there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler, and you can also pick up some really cool swag at our Spaced Out Radio store. Get yourself a t-shirt, an autographed poster, stickers, and if you're looking for a weekend getaway, September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon being held right here in my hometown, 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia, at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. It's going to be a great weekend, 3 days of paranormal talk, hauntings, UFO watches, live radio shows, silent auctions, and so much more. It's going to be a great weekend. You can get 10% off your tickets by buying them in the store before July 31st. We also have the Encounter Online, our news section put together by our editors Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham. You can also check out my latest blog there as well, and if you've had an experience you can't explain, do us a favor and fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Apparently, there is another Spaced Out Radio party going on right now that I wasn't invited to. I'm a little upset with this. We want to welcome in everyone listening in at West Georgia College down in Georgia. Jessica and her party friends are all together hanging out listening to us. Thank you so much. Do me a favor, Jessica. I want you to send me a message with a phone number to dave@spacedoutradio.com. My email once again, dave@spacedoutradio.com. I'm going to call you guys after the show, see how you liked it. I want to show my appreciation for you tuning us in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key. So make sure you get a hold of me. I want to have that email with that phone number so I can call you guys up after the show. So do me that favor. Thank you so much for throwing an SOR party. I'm still waiting for my invite. It hasn't come yet. Where is it? You know, I like beer. I drank beer in college. I just want to hang out. That's all I want to do. Anyways, Jessica, Dave at Spaced Out Radio, send me the phone number. I want to call you guys after the show, and thank you to Ryan at WQEE 99 Rock the Key for filling us in on what was going on with that party, because I love hearing that. It makes me feel really good for not only myself, but the rest of my audience, that everybody is starting to do this, have SOR parties, and hang out on the weekend. It's absolutely great. Author Dallas Tanner returns for his second trip to Spaced Out Radio tonight. An avid researcher and writer on the crypto world, Dallas loves discussing the very topics we love getting into on this show. Scary cryptids from Thunderbirds to Bigfoot, paranormal studies, and is there a connection? Do the two different topics correlate to one another? His first novel, Shadow of the Thunderbird, was actually required reading at a large technical college in South Carolina. He has frequently lectured, appeared on radio and TV shows, and presented at conferences on his books and interest in the crypto world. He is often cited in the media as an expert of the unknown or unexpected animals. When he isn't exploring the strangeness of these creatures, Dallas is hanging out, writing novels, and hanging out with his animals, his family. He's got a packed house right now of 9 people. Dallas Tanner, I don't know how you're finding it silent over there right now, but thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing wonderful. I appreciate you inviting me back. I'll tell you, the secret to a quiet house is to be on the right coast during the prime time of your show. I'm just north of Georgia. I'm in upstate South Carolina in Greenville, giving a bit of a shout out to the Walking Dead country, and everybody else is asleep. And with any luck, I'll come up with a way to keep it that way over the next 3 hours.
Well, you know what? We don't want you putting our audience to sleep here. We definitely don't want that, because I remember the last time you were on, we had an absolute blast. Because I got to tell you, my friend, talking about cryptids is so much fun, because as someone who has seen Bigfoot, and I saw 2 of them, I have been just enthralled with the sightings people have seen. I actually got one the other day in my email from north of me, about 5-6 hours drive north of me, if not further, from a guy saying that he went out one night just to kind of look at the stars, and he goes to this place on the mountain to relax, and all of a sudden in his headlights he saw these trees moving. Well, it's bear season around here now, so he thought there was a bear. He wasn't getting out of his vehicle. Next thing he knows, he sees the glowing eyes, the pointed ears, and a half dog, half man, which could be the first dogman sighting in British Columbia.
You know, that would not be really that unusual. The two tend to share borders, uneasy truces. They call it Dogman. The name that I've always given it is Wendigo. Wendigo. And the reason being, when I was in Oklahoma several years ago, I was actually visiting my editor, who has had not only a number of sightings, but leaves her home unlocked in case they want to drop by and step in. And the evidence that I saw included, because it was too big to cast in plaster, a 2.5-foot long Bigfoot track. It had the dermal ridges, the whorls, some scarring on it. Not 40 minutes away was the Choctaw shaman who taught me shamanism for my trilogy, which was actually read not only by as part of critical reading curriculum for this technical college system in all their campuses, but also a major university here in South Carolina. But I have always made the correlation that Dogman was Wendigo, because when you read the accounts, I call myself a folklorist now, because I no longer have to change or chase after things that I've witnessed myself, or the credible people that I know have passed along stories to me, and it includes any number of these cryptids, animals out of place or time, as I describe them. But Dogman and Bigfoot live almost always side by side with an uneasy truce. One hates the other, but you're talking about something that we would call a lycanthrope if it was a skin changer, or someone who literally transformed from a human into a beast. But these animals, as they are, these gaunt 7-foot-tall creatures with turned back knees, snouts, long ears, and a tail, I've seen video and pictures of. And with the Bigfoot, they do not get along, but they do coincide and live close to one another. But when they get together, it can be a dangerous place. And this friend of mine always rides with a gun, and he said, I know where they are, and I don't go there.
I want to get so much into this with you, my friend, because I got to get it all in, to be honest with you, because I know tonight's show is going to fly by, and before a blink of an eye, it's going to be over, and I'm going to be, damn it, I forgot to ask Dallas that, which is good, because then I have to bring you back on again. And apparently, every time we book a date for this show, something happens within that 24 hours that gives you some good luck. So I'd like you to fill in our fans what you're up to right now, because the last 24 hours, there's been a lot of cool things happen to you.
It's pretty interesting. I've had the opportunity over the last several years to do a lot of radio, do a couple seasons on Animal Planet of a show about myth and legends, and they would come to my house each season for 14 hours, and I really didn't have the questions much in advance of their visit. They would set up in my home, put the green screen behind me, give me a piece of tape to talk to, and over the space of over half a day, they would pump me for answers to over 300 questions. Now, that really only equates to 6 or 7 minutes actual screen time, but there was a show called Lost Tapes. It was kind of a Blair Witch approach. They would do kind of recreations of actual things or things that didn't really happen, but which would bring to the fore some of these myths and legends that we talked about. But I've kind of kept a low profile. I'm hovering around 5,000 friends on Facebook, but I haven't done a whole lot of writing, hadn't done a whole lot of anything, just enjoying being a new grandfather and growing into that. But as you mentioned, we talked before the show, but not only with this visit today, but next week I have a conference call with a production company out in Los Angeles that wants to put together and actually pitch another show on myths and legends. And they asked me in particular about the Wendigo and the Thunderbird. Now, I firmly believe in picking up from the native legends, historical accounts, eyewitness reports, putting all that together, and with this Cryptids trilogy I wrote to say, okay, if there was a species of animal that once lived, a megafauna or what have you, and it did not die out at the end of the last ice age, what animal would it be? And I've always found one that was spot on. And I've not only had that happen, but I went and visited with a friend online here that there were 3 authors, the 3 of us who started this whole revolution, really, with self-publishing 15 to 20 years ago. Now, this guy's doing extremely well. He's always been a fan of my work, and I've been a fan of his. But when he brought up the fact that I hadn't ever gone out of my way to really promote what he was doing, I said, well, in Alan McLean's book and even the movie, Clint Eastwood is reading a little paperback novel. He says, I can tell you one thing, no author worth their salt is going to give a recommendation to an author they think is going to do better than them. And it's true. He's done a lot better than me, but he's dragged me back out into the world. I'm going to be co-writing a major novel, one of those where his name is front and center and mine is beneath, but I get to take his story and tell it my way, which is going to be kind of exciting. But those 2 things, actually, including this, the third, have all happened literally in the space of 24 hours. The last time I was on your show, same thing. A lot of positive karma came my way, and I really appreciate the opportunity of exercising that good luck, and appreciate the chance to come and tell you about it.
No worries, my friend. You always got the open door policy here, I'll tell you that. That's just the way we do things around here. You're class people all the way. For the people who may not know who you are, and, there's people who don't know who I am, how did you get into the entire field of cryptids? What made you so interested in writing about them?
Well, I've always been interested in cryptozoology, and like everyone else back in the day, a lot of the early programming that was not just about World War II or about, travel or food would go occasionally into this other subject matter. And my father had been an author many, many, many moons ago, and I wanted to try my hand at it. I've always been able to turn a phrase, and I enjoy speaking to people, but in looking at subjects of myths and legends, lost cities stay lost, ghosts, not tangible, can't catch them, UFOs, you see something flash by, but cryptids have had such a profound influence culturally. They get adopted as to who comes into the country or the country we go into. The Thunderbird being a classic example. But because I don't break confidences and never have, not only could I write about things that I read about I could also incorporate things that were given to me by people who had experiences that otherwise not only I wouldn't have known about, but they wouldn't have shared, knowing that someone might want to exploit it, which is also the major case for Bigfoot. Bigfoot is not really migratory, but you have a creature that's rather retiring and shy, and if they're outed and a group of people just come in and say, you know what, we're going to go in the woods and look for them, I'm sorry, anyone who's called an expert who's on a television show has never seen a thing, and I know all these guys, all the, as you say, the big names, but the true researchers are incorporating all of these things and giving us the opportunity to know more about them. And that's really been kind of the case. I've actually had a situation that I'll give you a chance to talk here in a minute, where I can tell you about what happened after I published my Thunderbird novel. But cryptids are things that people have seen or have heard about virtually their entire lives. They're tangible creatures, and as you say, you can experience and witness them, and a lot of people have, particularly in case of Bigfoot.
I'm very interested in what you said just a few minutes ago in regards to the fact that you believe Dogman and Bigfoot do not get along. Why would you suggest that?
Well, let me tell you a quick story there. There was a photograph that came out on a trail camera, one of those motion sensor cameras, and it had what looked to be a juvenile Bigfoot with what looked to be a wolf pelt that was being pulled over his head as he walked by. I was given the account by the person who was actually in a position to know who this juvenile was, and that basically it was all that remained of a dog man that had the audacity to try and track and trap this juvenile Bigfoot. It was rendered from limb to limb by this Bigfoot that was, as I said, was 2.5 feet long. It had a track that was absolutely massive. This thing must have weighed 20 pounds just in the resin that was cast. But when it came out, a lot of experts, of course, were very interested in it. They wanted to go down there and do the research. Well, the people who actually know about these creatures and live near them and have witnessed and experienced them and gave them the names that they're known by regionally there, did everything they could to dissuade people from wanting to do that. Part of the problem that you run into is that, particularly with regard to the Dogman or the Wendigo, the Plains Indians, when I was out in Oklahoma back 6-7 years ago, I didn't hear a lot of talk about Bigfoot. Now, I know with the Texas Bigfoot Research Center, Craig Wolfeater and the folks there, marvelous people, great researchers, but I heard much more from Michigan all the way down to Louisiana about what they, especially at the north, called Dogman. But the Indians always told the pioneers crossing the plains, do not let your children leave the firelight if you wish to see them come the dawn. They were talking about the Wendigo, which they uttered in the same breath as the Dogman. It's a wolfish creature. It's not, again, a shapeshifter or anything like that. They're wholly evil creatures that feed on anything living they can get their hands on, including humans. And there are people that disappear in national parks every year. They say it's because of cougar, it's because of bear. Dogman is just about as prolific and prevalent and ubiquitous as Bigfoot himself. The problem is you cannot warn everybody away because they think it is far more mythical and it must just be this creature, the chimera with the head of a deer and the antlers and everything. Nope, it is just a vicious, wolfish creature that has the temperament of a canine.
What makes Dogman, in your opinion, so cat-like? It's pissed off all the time. It's like a house cat, man. You know, it's angry just because it's Friday night at 9:24 p.m. Pacific time. What makes Dogman so angry, do you think?
I think the Dogman is just less of a civilized creature. I think it is more bestial. I think it's more canid, whereas not leonid at all, not like a cat so much. It is very wolfish. But the thing that I learned in the research that I did for my second novel, my first novel was called Shadow of the Thunderbird. The second novel was Tracking the Bigfoot. I had the opportunity going down and meeting Lauren Coleman. He and I drove together to the conference that they had down there, and I actually talked to a group of Bigfooters about Thunderbird, but I learned a lot about Bigfoot. Bigfoot is really a prototypical human. Dogman is actually something that despite the fact that it can raise itself off of all fours, sometimes resorts to it and acts like an untamed beast whenever it's encountered. There is no civility to it. It does not have any humanity as Bigfoot does.
I understand that. And I understand that it is a pissed off creature. I'm having troubles trying to venture into what it would be like running into this. And I'll tell you this story, okay, because I like to tell stories, and it's kind of part of my job.
Sure.
The audience has heard this one. I know you haven't, but I'll fill you in. Last year, my wife and I, we went out and we were going to look for firewood. And here in British Columbia, you have the legal right to cut down any dead trees in the forest for your firewood for at home, or maybe you got, a fire pit outside, or whatever the case may be, because dead trees are what cause forest fires. So they really don't mind. They really don't mind you taking a dead tree. So my wife and I drive up this mountain called Mount Timothy, and I know Mikey, who's in the chat room right now, he'll know exactly where I'm talking about because I've taken him to the spot. And we drive down this logging road. And immediately, I don't know how you are with, picking up on energy or just that uncomfortable feeling. We start driving down this road. My wife and I are kind of empathic, and it doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right, Dallas. And we come to this area, and I get out of the vehicle, and immediately it was uncomfortable. I'd never been uncomfortable on that mountain. I've been around bears. I've been around cougars. I've been around aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts. This was an energy that I had never felt before. So literally, I'm standing there with my chainsaw, and I'm thinking, I'm just here to take a dead tree to help out the forest. I'm going to cut it up, load it into my truck, and then we're going to go. And my wife was so freaked out that she actually wouldn't even let our little guy out of the truck. That's how weirded out she was. And we were trying to figure out what this energy was until we continued driving down this logging road, probably another 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile. Come around and we find this big tree again that we want to take down for firewood, but the feeling is more intense. And I'm trying to go through every supernatural and live creature that I can go through in my head, trying to figure out, okay, is that cougar energy? Does that feel like a bear? Just trying to pick it up. And I couldn't figure it out. Then all of a sudden I thought to myself, I wonder if that's Dogman. I wonder if that's what Dogman feels like. And the minute I said that, both my wife and I, we got chills up and down our spines. Like, we had to get the hell out of there. And we stayed close to the truck. We're like, no, we're not taking this tree. We'll go to a different part of the mountain. Go to the different part of the mountain. Everything seems fine. Nothing going on. It was the weirdest and strangest occurrence I've had in nature, man. And I don't know. It could have been my imagination thinking it was Dogman. But I just did not recognize this very uncomfortable energy. Have you heard of anything like that before?
Well, I have, and over the course of the shamanism that I learned, again, I'm not practicing at all. I'm very much a Christian existentialist, but that is one thing I heard over and over again, that when you were basically a shaman is someone who leads you to your totem spirit, the animal that you most closely favor or resemble with regard to your personality and temperament and that sort of thing. Dogman is really an aberration, and that gave rise to the story that it was really a spiritual creature, or one that rose from the spilled blood on spilling of innocent blood on snow. It really had nothing to do with that, but they've spoken time and again about this really, really negative energy that accompanies them. And this friend of mine, being a Choctaw shaman, he knows when they're about, and he has had occasions where they have disrupted his life, even attacked the barn where his horses were, and things of this nature. The other friend that lived somewhat close, but in Oklahoma terms, probably half hour, 40 minutes away, they would never show themselves because this was firmly within the domain of this patriarchal Bigfoot. This one, I have actually a tape, not videotape, but packing tape. There was an occasion where the person who was in touch with me said that, and she lived out on her own, and pretty much in the middle of nowhere, that a pickup truck had come after midnight one night, because she keeps horses for people, she keeps farm equipment, things like that. I think from what she was telling me, they were probably after copper, which has been a common thing of theft for some time for its value. And they jumped out of their truck with the lights on, the engine running. And no sooner had they done so than, and she lived in a modular home on a concrete apron. Everything went black over her window where the headlights had been coming through. And these men literally screamed, turned around, ran, got in their truck, squealed tires, and hauled ass and got out of there. She walked up to her window and pulled over the curtains, and there was a solid field of black in front of it. She said that was the closest she ever came to seeing the one that she knew, based on the foot size and the places where she'd seen it before, had to be 12 feet in height, which is the largest I've ever seen, or ever heard of being seen. Anyway, it was massive. The next day, she saw this massive handprint. She took a piece of tape, like clear packing tape, and she took an image of the index finger, which was approximately 12 to 14 inches long, about 3.5 to 4 inches wide. Again, dermal ridges, whorls, all of it. And she folded it over herself. And I have it to this day from her. But Dogman keeps clear of her property because of these other creatures. Now, the thing that I can tell you, and this was always a question for people too, I don't consider myself really that overly empathetic, not even to people. It's just I tend to be a little hermitish. But I was at this lady's home for a week. We were there doing some other kind of book work together, and on 2 successive occasions at night, I kneeled down to say my prayers, and I could have sworn I heard my name called. I just kind of shook it off, and I finished and just had my night. The next night, I heard this deep, mellifluous, feminine voice called my name, and I know it didn't sound like the person that I was staying with, because this one was in her late 70s, early 80s. She sounded like Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. But I went around the corner. I said, "Did you call me?" And she said, "No, but I know that Mama's about, and she's trying to talk to you." I said, "What am I supposed to do?" She said, "All you got to do is go back in your room, lay down, and talk back to her. She doesn't need to see your face. She doesn't have to be close enough to see your lips move. You know what she's saying because she's telling you what she's thinking," which is something I'd heard but wondered about. But there's a different kind of spirituality to the creature that's Bigfoot. He knows you're coming. He knows literally who's going to invade his domain. On the other end, you have a creature that doesn't really communicate with you, but just has such a terrible negative vibe that radiates out from them that people like my friend, the shaman, know when they're about. And he's trained cameras and taken pictures without actually seeing anything. until the picture was developed. And these things are gaunt and frightening, and there are places that people do not go certain times of the year. And I know of at least 6 or 7 occasions where they found missing people desiccated and pulled 20, 30 feet up in a tree where no cat could have dragged them. So yeah, they're dangerous and they're best to be avoided, and you did a good thing. There is no communicating with them. It's not like seeing a deer or a bear or even a cougar in nature. These things sense where you are, and they tend to skulk and use a lot of stealth, but they've been known to kill. And no one could account for it except for the fact that no cat could have dragged a human being that far up in a tree and done to it what it did.
My goodness. My goodness. Well, you know what? We got out of there, and, you know, a couple of my buddies, we went and got wood in that area a week or so later, and it just wasn't that feeling. Wasn't that feeling at all, and it was pretty intense. I hope I don't feel it again, because I'm not a gun carrier. I don't have a gun. I don't have a license or anything along those lines. I have friends who do. But, you know, usually from what I'm doing out in the forest getting firewood, my chainsaw is, you know, close enough to scaring the animals away and keeping them away with the noise. But this was just eerie, man. It was absolutely eerie. You know, I would take Bigfoot. I would take a Bigfoot Sasquatch sighting anytime over a Dogman sighting. But you know what? Now, I got to say, because I've seen all this stuff personally, I kind of want to see one now. You know, I really want to see one. And I don't know. I'm not going to look for it. I could tell you that. And I don't think...
I had a good...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention that because of all the associations that I've made as a result of the books I've written, again, I do pick a species that I believe that these things are, and I do believe in a certain species of creature. You kind of have to read the novels, how they work. They're required reading it at college. But I had a good friend. I made a trip to Oklahoma from South Carolina, was able to stop through Tennessee and Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma on my way to visit my editor. And as it so happened, I was able to meet the 12 to 14 people who were involved in my publishing company at the time. But I had a friend who was retired military, decorated sniper, who had an equally decorated retired colonel in Oklahoma that he wanted to visit. And he would be going back the same route. And he said, I'd like to experience something with Bigfoot. He was always interested. This guy he's about 6'6". Now, if you can imagine how tall Michael Jordan is and double the height, that's the size of Papa in this family. But he said, I'd like to have an experience with Bigfoot. If I went by, you know, this lady's house, would it happen for me too? I said, how long would you be there? He said, a couple hours. I said, oh, sure, that's plenty of time. He went there, and he was tired, and of course, being the accommodating woman this lady was, she said, well, why don't you go in and take a nap? And she was walking around with her dog. She has Rottweilers, but they're not all spooked, because one of these creatures lives, well, let's put it this way, sleeps in a bed of leaves between the windows of the two rooms. And it just about moved it off its foundation one night. I heard this boom, and the house shuddered. And they're interesting. But he laid down. He said after about a half hour, he said the door pushed open, and he heard this plodding, and he thought, it must be her dog. And something sat down on the bed, and he said it smelled dog-like. And he said it didn't really bother him. He was resting, and then after a time, it got up. He went out and talked with her, and said, "Well, your dog came in and took a little nap with me." And she said, "Oh, nonsense! My dog hasn't left my side all afternoon." And so he had his experience. Now, one thing I got to tell you just real quick. the way that I depict Bigfoot in my novel, it really bothers me when I know a lot of authors that say that they're these people or these creatures that are out to get people. They're vicious. They're just primitive. They're nothing of the sort. And case in point, she used to raise Arabian horses. I think she was keeping 2 or 3 for that other fellow I was telling you about, which is how I came to know her. But really, the quick end of the story is she got a little upset when I drove up and met her outside of the conference in Texas where we'd actually come across one another, because the Bigfoot had gone through, as she called them, the foots, had gone through and braided the tail and mane of 5 Arabian ponies. And I sat out there with her and talked for the better part of an hour, hour and a half while she undid these braids. And I thought, well, maybe she did those for my benefit. Well, the next morning I heard her fussing. She was out, feeding her animals and everything, because they had come right back during the night and rebraided the manes and tails of all these horses. And they're just like that. They're very fastidious creatures for the size and bulk.
It amazes me that an animal with the strength and the power of a horse would allow Sasquatch to do that. We actually have 3 listeners listening in right now, one in Ontario, one in California, and one who used to live in Colorado, who actually had braids in their horses' manes and tails. And they were in Sasquatch territory, all 3 of them. Why do you think they are doing that?
Well, as I said, the more I learned about these creatures, and I've interviewed John Green and Peter Byrne and you name it, Lauren Coleman, anybody who's anybody in this field, and they talk as if they're dealing with animals. You're not dealing with an animal. You're dealing with a prototypical human that. I've had these discussions before where they try to say that they're descended from Esau. Esau was just the hairy brother who had his birthright stolen, in trading for a bowl of soup for his blind father in the Bible. Well, what I've learned, there are a lot of Mormons in cryptozoology. I'm actually LDS myself. I'm Mormon. But what I learned is these are kind and gentle forest folk. They're big enough and powerful enough to take apart any other creature. They realize it, but they want to live side by side, and they know who they can trust and who they can't. And the people who contact me don't want to be thought crazy, but also they want to protect the privacy and the experience that they're having with these creatures. Now, these knuckleheads that go out in the woods and, they knock trees and they try to imitate the sound, they come off like complete idiots to these creatures, but they tend to like to rearrange their environment. They do these things called tree twists. What they do is they mark their territory by saying, you know what, you look at a tree and how high up and how thick that tree is that they can literally twist in their hands and unravel it is a sign that unless you're this tall and this strong, you know what, get out of my territory. But they're not warning man. They're warning really anyone that would come into that domain. But they are gentle animals. These Rottweilers can be vicious beasts, but they don't say anything when these creatures come across. I was eventually shown 20 to 30 tracks, including the growing juvenile that ended up being about 8 or 9 feet tall and slept in a bed of leaves behind the bushes between the windows of this woman's house. And but they braid the manes and tails all the time. It was almost a daily regimen with them. She'd get a little upset with them, but they loved her. She left her door unlocked, and case in point, that friend of mine was taking a nap, and one of them had come in and sat down. She never locked her doors because she knew they would protect her, as this 12-foot specimen did that I have the fingerprint of to this day.
Getting back to Dogman for a second, Mike in the chat room is asking, what does a Dogman print actually look like?
Well, it's kind of an odd thing. I don't know of really anybody who has taken. The problem is it has a long foot that is padded at the front with the claws and the pads of a wolf, except that it's more human. I'd never really heard of an example where anybody had found a definitive track that. Because Bigfoot, it's hard to say, this is a bear, this is whatever it happens to be. But with Dogman, because basically only about half the foot, actually, if you've ever seen like the Underworld movies, the werewolves they depict are very much like the Dogman. The only thing is they're muscle-bound. They always do these muscle-bound creatures. Dogman is gaunt, skinny, narrow at the hip and shoulder, has impossibly long arms, impossibly long hands, his snout. Half the foot actually touches the ground because after that the ankle rolls back into a backward knee. If you've ever lifted a dog up by its front paws, that's kind of what the foot is like for the Dogman. It actually has greater length, more like a human's, but it walks up on the balls of its feet, not its heels. And oftentimes when you do find tracks, you think, it must be an oversized wolf or something, or bear. There's more misidentification because it is such a bestial track that it leaves behind. But that's the closest you come. People easily dismiss it. Whereas Bigfoot, it's a little tough. When you see one that's over 2 feet long, you don't mistake it for anything else.
We actually found a couple of Bigfoot prints probably about 8-9 miles from my house last October. It's impressive to see them in the ground. The one print, the first print my friend Mike found, it was imprinted in a logging road. And if you've never been out in the mountains or traveled a logging road, that ground is so compact and so hard. A semi-truck full of logs barely makes a dent in the road. You could barely notice the tracks. And here was this footprint. It was right foot. It was about 17 and a half inches long by about 8.5 inches wide. And it was absolutely incredible. By the time I had got there, it had been driven over. But I got the photo of it on my phone, and about 150 feet into the forest, when we were kind of perusing around looking for other prints, that's where we found the second one, which was only about 11 and a half by about 5.5 inches. And it's intimidating to see, because Mike, my buddy, he's about 5'11", he's about 260 pounds, he's a big boy. And I'm not saying fat. He is a big, strong ox of a man. And he started jumping up and down, trying to create a print with his outdoor boots. And there was nothing in that ground. So we're dealing with something big. We're dealing with something that is very large and in charge of its own environment, whether you're dealing with Bigfoot or the aggressiveness of Dogman, aren't we?
Dogman doesn't leave much of a carbon footprint. It is not a very heavy animal. It is about 6 to 7 feet in height, but again, very skinny, very gaunt. So it's not going to leave that kind of ground in impacted earth. It reminded me of something. This kind of brings together all the points we've talked up to now. Now, your listeners in Georgia may or may not know, it's known in the South. There's a town in Lee County below Columbia, South Carolina, called Bishopville. And if you've never heard the story of Bishopville, in July of 1988, there was a young man who dropped off a date, and he was coming home when he had a flat tire, and he went to change the tire. And about the time that he was done, he was hearing this sound, just this heavy whoosh, 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 of someone or something running toward him. He stood up. This is near a place called the Scrape-Ore Swamp, middle of nowhere, dead of night. You could hear the insects, full moonlight, full stars, little town right there called Bishopville. He saw something big and black running at him across an open field, and he jumped in his car, turned on the car, and took off and drove as fast as he could. This road is usually about just 25, 35 miles an hour because you're winding through swamp country with Spanish moss and the cypress, everything prototypical for the swampish area. This thing bounded onto the road behind him and gave chase. And because he was in his father's car, and it's a big car, he was trying to keep it on the road, at the same time looking at this creature that caught up to him and started scrabbling at the door handle, trying to open the door while he was driving, but easily keeping up with him, driving 30 miles an hour. Now, as you know, a human, top speed, dead heat, perfect physical conditioning, can usually run 20 to 23 miles an hour. Well, he finally outdistanced this thing, whether he tightened it out or what, but he drove to his home, and as soon as he hit his yard, he opened the door and he jumped out and let the car roll off into the backyard, and he ran into his father, and he was hysterical, and it took half the night for his father to calm him down from whatever it was he saw. Well, 2 weeks later, Sheriff Liston Truesdale, who became a good friend of mine, was on television because there'd been a car sitting in an awning that had been literally torn to pieces, and the owners had not heard a sound. The rag top was torn off. The hood ornament was crushed by these giant figures. Something had reached up under the car and pulled the electrical harness out. The headlight, something reached in and literally pulled the headlights out of it, had chewed on the rubber of the car, scored it, not with anything metallic, but it's like, for some reason, it was something that took a strong dislike to this car. And he was called out to investigate. And as you say, they were walking around the swamp, and they had a squad car come that ran over a set of tracks. They were 4-toed, not 5. Now, the odd thing about that is, like you say, because of the density and the weight of these creatures, the distribution of the weight in the car tire did not completely obliterate or sink to the level of this track. They took casts of them, and I'd actually been able to hold them at a later date. But the story... Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't say anything. That was just echo on your end.
Oh, sorry. But that's what it reminded me of, was this story. And the thing is, being a researcher, I was able to come to a point of friendship with Sheriff Truesdale, because everybody who's ever reported on Bishopville has come to hear of a creature called Lizard Man, because Lizard Man was a legend out of the Scrape-Ore Swamp. Now, when they saw these tracks, they said, "Oh, it must be Lizard Man." It'd been a legend, and so this mythology grew around it. That this boy, 17 years old, Chris Davis, had encountered some crocodilian or reptilian creature that had bounded on the car and tried to tear the top of the car. They basically blended the story of the car that was torn apart under the awning next to the home of these people that could have heard any sound, and this boy that outran this other creature, and it got blown out of proportion. And this is where it comes in, that nobody wants to be thought of as crazy, and nobody wants to ruin the experience of what they're having. In this case, Sheriff Truesdale had stood up in front of local television cameras and said, "We've got something. We don't know what it is, but if you've encountered anything unusual, tell us about it." Well, this man took his son, Chris, to visit him, and Sheriff Truesdale, who was a good man, said, "Now, you need to understand, we think something positively unusual is going on, and here's what we need to do, because we're not playing here. We have to protect the public. I am going to ask you to draw a picture of what you saw. I'm going to polygraph you. I'm going to videotape you. If you fail on any of those 3 counts, I'm going to think you're trying to pull my leg, and I will jail you, because the public safety is involved. Now, what he didn't admit at first was when Chris Davis drew his picture of what it was he saw. Chris Davis sat there with his father as Sheriff Truesdale in his sheriff's office, pulled open the desk drawer, took out 2 other pictures that looked just like it.
Oh, wow.
They weren't the first. And eventually there would be over a dozen people who came forward, drew what they saw, because he never showed those pictures to anybody else. I saw those pictures. It only confirmed what I said to him, what I believed it was, and he smiled and said I was right. But they were polygraphed. And we're not talking about from a distance. We're talking about a creature that would drop down in front of a moving car and stop it, or run alongside. And in the case of one family, there was a mother driving, teenager in the front seat, 2 small children with Happy Meals in the back. This thing came out of the side of the road, reached in, and took the Happy Meal of one of these kids.
Dallas,
and ran off.
Dallas, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because we're going to have to step out for a break here pretty quick on Spaced Out Radio. We're going to continue with more Lizard Man, Dog Man, Bigfoot, Thunderbirds, and every cryptid in between. Author Dallas Tanner is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Relax. Chill out. Have a drink. It's Friday night, early Saturday morning. Spaced Out Radio listeners, we'll be back with hour number 2 right after this. Coming September 29th to October 1st, the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon. Hi, this is Dave Scott. The event will be held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Come join us for an amazing weekend of speakers talking all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, aliens, Sasquatch, intuitiveness. Listen to great speakers like Miriam Delicato, Samantha Mowat, and the crypto guru Ronald Murphy. Get your VIP passes by going to spacedoutradio.com and clicking on the Paracon banner. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up, enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Be sure you stick around for the weekend. After this show, I'm going to find my Zen and my Chi out in the wilderness of the mountains of British Columbia. But don't fret, because Elizabeth Anglin and James Tyson will be in for Spaced Out Weekend, Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. We want to welcome in Jessica and all her friends at West Georgia College, listening in at their Spaced Out Radio party. Thank you so much for tuning us in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, where they filmed The Walking Dead. We are also live on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Counter-immunoelectrophoresis. Counter-immunoelectrophoresis is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with me live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, Player.fm, and Stitcher. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we got a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can go to the Spaced Out Radio store, pick up a t-shirt, stickers, autographed posters, and your tickets to the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, being held right here in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia, at the beautiful Spruce Hill Spa and Resort, September 29th to October 1st. We'd love to have you here. VIP tickets are 10% off until July 31st, so make sure you get your tickets, because we want to see all our Spaced Out Radio listeners up here in the Great White North for that weekend of paranormal celebration. On our website, you can also check out the Encounter Online, our news section put together by Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. Tonight we are talking with crypto author Dallas Tanner. We're getting into everything from Bigfoot, Dogman, Lizard Man, Thunderbirds, and so much more. Dallas, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. I describe myself now as a folklorist, again, because I like to find the truth of these things. You hear the myth, you hear the sensationalism all the time, and especially down Georgia way and in the southeast. Now, I don't know how young your listeners are. I've done a lot of lecturing in the college circuit, that sort of thing. But this beast that I'm talking about was called Lizard Man because there was a native legend of this lizard man. But they combined the stories, the media did, of the car that was torn to pieces and the guy who outran this creature. Well, Sheriff Truesdale eventually, and this was again July 1988, he went on the media after they made these odd requests and announced that they had some kind of strange animal that they were dealing with. The story got out that Lizard Man was in Bishopville in Lee County, and you had a fledgling CNN go there. You had the Today Show. You had all of these celebrities from daytime TV and all over, and it caused this little town of 4,000 that I think its primary income is its landfill. Not speaking ill of the town, but that was the one thing I remember about it, depending on which way the wind was blowing. But the population swelled to over 60,000 people that came and stayed. If you can imagine, if you made Thanksgiving dinner for your immediate family and all of your extended family, out 3 generations, came and stayed for a month or more, you can imagine what it was like. This town, having had this unusual event, at first tried to make money on T-shirts and things like that. This was kind of great. Everybody, the Today Show was airing from Bishopville. It turned into a media circus, so much so that after about 3 or 4 months of this, it was definitely interfering with them trying to find out what was happening. Sheriff Truesdale told them about October of that year. He said, "We've had no more sightings. It's left. It's gone. You can go home now." And they did eventually. There was a little CNN crew that would tag along behind him or his deputies. But I had the opportunity of talking with him, And I said, well, how long was it before you actually had your last sighting? He said, well, that was October of 88. We finally got rid of all those folks. But we didn't have the last sighting until 1993. And that's where the 12 people came along, eventually, all those individuals. And he and I went for a ride, and he showed me every place where it was seen, including by one fellow who stopped by a little bridge there, and there's an old-style pump. He was getting some water, stood up and looked, and he said this thing was literally standing across the bridge from about 20 feet. He said, I know with this bicycle I wasn't going to outrun him. But the one thing that was so characteristic of it, again, 4 toes, it was described, narrow shoulder, narrowed hip, and possibly long arms, very aggressive toward people. But the other thing was, as the cars would go by and it would take what it wanted, it reached up a long arm and swung itself up into the tree. So they weren't dealing with anything really known or named before. And the odd thing was, again, everybody thought it was reptilian, crocodilian, it was lizard man. I looked at him and I said, this is what they call a skunk ape, isn't it? And he just kind of grinned. He said, yeah, they gave a name to it. He said, what he was describing, you have the Bigfoot in the West, which is a bear-like creature that's gentle, that seems disoriented when it's around people and traffic. Not so much this thing. In the Southeast, there's been different names for it, the Honey Island swamp monster, the Fylth monster. It's all the same animal. It is a 4-toed, 4-fingered creature, highly aggressive, not as tall, not as big. If you were to put it somewhere, if you were to take like the dog man, the proportions of it, but make it ape-like, that's the southern Bigfoot, or what they call a skunk ape, because it has this horrific smell that accompanies it. Not just like a wet dog like my friend the Colonel described, but fast forward about 20 years, and there was another occurrence. There was a step-up van that was ripped to shreds right on the edge of Scrape Bore Swamp. Sheriff Truesdale had retired. Now, I'd kept in touch with him. This was from the time we had a conference at the college where I flew in some of the well-known cryptozoologists to talk with me and others about these kind of creatures. But Sheriff Truesdale said, I wish I'd never made the announcement, because every time they came to interview him, it was always tongue-in-cheek and to laugh at him, make fun of him. Sci-Fi Channel in particular, a lady who had been on the Stargate TV series came and put a little tiny hat on his head. He said, they made a fool of me. He said, I'm sorry I ever did it. And I felt really bad for him. But eventually what happened there with that step-up band, I only found out because I was contacted by one of the news agencies. I think it was probably out of Columbia or Atlanta there, somewhere in between. They said, we're going to go there. We want you to be our on-air presence. I said, I appreciate it, but I respectfully decline. I wouldn't do that. And the interesting thing was, like before, they had dead cattle with broken neck, missing pets, people saying they see big black figures with these. That was the other trait that Chris Davis had mentioned, large luminous eyes. Chris Davis was so altered by this event that he went from being an AB student working at McDonald's to getting himself in all kinds of trouble to where he had to leave town, and he was finally found dead as a result of a bad drug deal. His mind was completely blown by these events. But with all that had happened, something had reached up, taken the luggage rack, and snapped the bars on it. And you had teeth mark. You had a popped tire where it looked like something just crushed it and bent the rim of especially rim of a van. And the sheriff had gone to Sheriff Truesdale and said, what should I do? And he took his advice. He said, tell him it's a dog. And that's what they did. And they went away. And sure as the world, this creature really hasn't gone anywhere. Yeah, there are flaps of it where it appears and where it doesn't. But you're talking about a skunk ape, a highly aggressive creature. And the effect of the interference, well-meaning or not, whether that creature was benign or malignant in its intentions, the thing is, you know what? It's better not to tell anybody about it, because they're going to think you're crazy and treat you like a fool. or they're going to interfere. And if it's a benign event like having Bigfoot in the area, they will leave knowing that they can't trust that their privacy has been protected by you not talking about who they are, what they are, and where they can be found.
I want to get to some audience questions here, but first I want to ask you this question. A lot of people, myself included, tend to believe that you don't see Sasquatch, it sees you, or it allows you to see it. Do you buy into that theory?
I think to an extent. You were talking about being a little empathetic, and there are people that have a higher sensitivity. Now, one thing that I've come to know and understand is that there is a certain amount of spirituality involved in all things in nature. But there was one fellow I interviewed one time, and I can't recall his name. He's well known. He actually teaches family therapists. This is a guy who, again, is he said he's about 6'6". He said he was walking, and I don't know the exact name of it. There's this horseshoe-shaped trail with a giant tree at the head of it. And he said, I went there with my family, and we decided, everybody was going up the left-hand side. That's where you do your ascend, and then the descent is on the other. He took them the back way. They got about halfway up. He excused himself, believed himself in the woods, and came back, and he said, I was trying to pass between two trees when I realized it was only one tree. When I excused myself, he said, I was looking at the broad shoulders and back about the shoulder blades of something that was a good foot and a half taller than me and much broader. I said, what did you do? He said, I edged by it, and I said, excuse me. And he just walked around it and got his family, and he said, we got to go down. 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 What's the matter? What's the matter? He took his wife by the arm and ushered his children in front of him, and he walked them back down. And he said, here I am, a trainer, a family therapist, and I went into the ranger station. There was this little 5-foot-tall ranger patting him on the shoulder while he just had racking sobs and cried about this thing that absolutely blew his mind. He didn't know why he had that experience, but he said from that day forward, one thing he decided that he was going to do was he would not only, counsel trainers, family therapists, but he would also reach out to anyone who had this experience, because he said there's nobody that has not had the same experience that can possibly understand how it changes you and changes your outlook on life, particularly when you don't consider yourself an expert and you wish you hadn't had that experience, but now that you have, there it is, and that's what happens to good people.
Let's get to some audience questions here. This one coming from Australia, from Steve. He is asking, do you think that these creatures know the difference between hunters and non-hunters? Do you think they know what a rifle is and therefore stay away?
I think they do. Matter of fact, as I said, they are articulate creatures. Now, I didn't see this matriarch, and I have names for each of these that I won't give because, again, I don't break the confidences of the people who share things with me. Let me tell you just a real quick story out of Mormon history, and it's an odd thing about Mormonism. Jeff Meldrum, myself, Grover Krantz, although he was a Jack Mormon, we believe in Bigfoot. It's part of our church tradition and history. And there was actually a book written, and the account, if you read the Concordance of Mormon History, it's actually from journal entries in the 1830s. There was a man who described himself as riding slowly on the back of a laggard mule up a trail, and this was up in New England. He said, I was riding along when all of a sudden a man well beyond my own height, covered in red hair, came out of the brush beside the road and walked along with me. He said he didn't just walk along, he spoke to me as a man would, and we conversed with one another. And finally I said, stranger or brother, what branch of humanity are you? And he said, the creature said to him, I am of the clan of Cain. And it said the man rebuked him, and the creature went off in the woods. Now, I was told this story by Lauren Coleman, but when I went back and read the account in Genesis of Cain, his big concern was, he said, you're going to make me beast-like. They're going to think I'm an animal. They'll try to kill me. And he was allowed enough of his humanity that when they looked upon him, they would know him to not be a beast. Now, fast forward to about 10, 15 years ago, there's a Bigfoot in North Carolina called Blondie. It is yellow-haired, and I wrote about it in my novel Track of the Bigfoot, which turned out to be actually a bestseller for me. But there was a man describing, and they played the tape of the 911 call where this man said he said there was somebody looking into my dog pen. He said, but my dog pen, because my dogs are big and can jump, that was 6.5 feet tall, and this being, this creature, was just leaning over and peering down into it. The dogs were going berserk. And the 911 call said, there's some big creature that's looking into my dog pen. He said, can I shoot it? Is it an animal? Is it a man? If I kill it, am I going to be in trouble for murder or what? And so he didn't take a shot at it. But the thing is, they do have that humanity to their appearance. They do know when you have a gun. If they can talk to me from the space of a mile or more away, and I don't consider myself to be any kind of clairvoyant, I am congenitally deaf in my right ear, and that is the ear that I heard this voice in as if it was right beside me. They know where we are and what we're doing, and the reason that they're so hard to catch, they know we're coming, and they know what we're coming for. And you can think of it as a stupid animal, but it's not. It's coincided with man. But I think with its abilities, I think it's far superior to man. And no picture has ever been taken of it, really, where it wasn't half hidden or blurry if it was out in the open. Now, what kind of anything can move that fast to create that kind of image and feel? But yes, I believe it's intelligent. I believe it knows when a hunter's coming. It just makes itself scarce rather than like Dogman. And Dogman will come up on you whether you're armed or not. So it's a better thing to be armed if you know where and what it's up to. And it is an animal, and it is human but less human, and that's why the Plains Indians told the pioneers about the Wendigo. And I'm probably the only one who makes the correlation between the two, but the tribes talk identically about one and the other.
Let's get to another question here. This one comes from Galen, and she is asking, even though they don't get along, do you believe there is some relation between Dogman and Bigfoot anyway?
I don't think there is really a relation. Just between the two individuals, and I love them both. One is a sister, one is a brother. The fact that one has such humanity, it would braid the tail and mane of a horse, and the other has such bestiality and inhumanity to it that it has literally broken the neck and disemboweled horses, which is one reason why the horses were kept at my friend's house, because these things would try to get to his horses, and he'd have to spend nights sometimes in his stable with his guns. There is no correlation or relation to them. The closest thing, I did make that dissimilarity where Skunk Ape was of basically the stature of Dogman or the Wendigo. But again, you're talking about a creature that's more aggressive, not afraid of people, able to keep up with traffic, and will swing up in a tree and out of sight. But that's indicative of all skunk apes. We have something in the South that's far more aggressive, but I still haven't heard of it. It'll steal your Happy Meal, but it isn't going to kidnap you. And at no time, even though it posed a threat, the only person who was ever arrested with regard to Bishopville was the guy who fired a gun in the town limits because he thought he had seen it. And he was also the only one arrested because Sheriff Truesdale said, okay, now draw what you saw. We're going to polygraph you and videotape you. And if you're lying, we're going to lock you up. Well, he fired a gun within the town limits. He was going to get arrested anyway, but I saw the picture he drew, which was of something that looked very much like a velociraptor. And listen, I said, what did you do? And I said, come with me. I didn't even bother to polygraph him. We did a breathalyzer, and he passed that, but I locked him up anyway. But that's there is no correlation between them, and that trail cam picture was of the juvenile Bigfoot carrying the pelt of a dogman that was killed by that 12-foot specimen that towered at least 4 to 5 feet over. It was probably several hundred pounds heavier because, like us, it doesn't make much an impression in the ground, and when you do see it, it's easy to mistake as some kind of Canada wolf or maybe even a cat if you don't know what you're looking at.
I can tell you this. I would love to see that fight. Dogman versus Bigfoot. That would be fantastic. That would be the brawl of the century. I'd pay pay-per-view money for that. I would. I would.
No, I understand. Absolutely. When I wrote my novel Track of the Bigfoot, again, the creatures I write about, and the folks in Georgia know about the Altameaha, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing is, I wrote about the Wendigo, but not as the Dogman. It was before I came to that knowledge and understanding. There is a creature. Again, I picked the species of what I believe Bigfoot to be, and I think I'm spot on. And the forensic anthropologists at the University of Florida in Gainesville, where I lectured, tended to agree with me from the physiology. But they talk always about, the land bridge of the Bering Strait that dissolved toward the end of the last ice age, and about a creature called Gigantopithecus. And here's the science. Everyone would try to say, these experts, that Gigantopithecus lived in North America and that it accounted for Bigfoot. That somehow, and this was the difference, I knew this to be the largest true ape that ever lived. It was a pongid. It was a knuckle walker. It didn't walk upright. It did have the sagittal crest. They're actually, the Salish Indians in the Pacific Northwest would bind their heads to be more like their angry brothers that they used to trade with. Angry just more referring to the size and potential harm that they could do. But in order to point out that Gigantopithecus was not Bigfoot, I made Gigantopithecus the Wendigo in my novel. The novel, as I said, pretty well received, but they would always point to, and I know a lot of your listeners know this story about in an apothecary shop in Hong Kong back in, I think it was the 1930s, someone had found the tooth of a Gigantopithecus and said, it must be 6 to 7 feet tall. Therefore, and that's how they extrapolated, 6 to 7 feet tall, that's perfect. It's no longer a knuckle walker. It more or less changed species, became prototypical human, walked upright. But I said that if it stood upright, Gigantopithecus would be 12 to 15 feet in height. And of course, again, I was slammed as being just somebody who really didn't like to go out in the woods and learn this stuff firsthand. Well, I don't know any expert who's actually seen any of these creatures firsthand. But what happened was, when they had Peter Jackson's King Kong movie come out about 10 years ago or so, they went back to China. It said, in search of King Kong, looking for the Gigantopithecus. They went back to the apothecary shop and found some of the samples. And the interpreter said, we like to take the smaller teeth, the juvenile teeth, because they're softer. We can grind them down and put them into our poultices and powders, things like that. And they said, would you mind taking us where you find these teeth? They were taken to a cave up by the side of a mountain, and they went inside, and they found teeth roughly 2.5 times the size of the teeth that were found back in the 1930s. And they came away saying, well, I think we found King Kong. If what the apothecaries are looking for, the juvenile teeth, the adult, well, if this creature stood up, it would be 12 to 15 feet in height. And I just thumbed my nose and said, once again, I know what I'm talking about, folks.
I'm a firm believer, and I will go against the grain here, in believing that Bigfoot, even Dogman, but let's focus on Bigfoot here for a minute, is something different. I don't believe it's an animal at all. I think there's something very strange and supernatural about this creature that many of us and the majority of researchers absolutely refuse to believe or even look into. And this will get into our science talk here momentarily, but I want to get to another couple of questions from our audience. This one comes from BTO. Do you believe these are natural creatures to Earth, extraterrestrials, and or interdimensional bipedal beings?
That's kind of an interesting question there. The reason I say that is oftentimes the sightings of Bigfoot coincides with other type of paranormal events. You have these waves where you hear about ghosts or UFOs. Whenever these things are going on, if you were to read the story or the account of Mothman, every paranormal event you can possibly name, from Men in Black to ghosts to disembodied voices to this demonic Mothman creature itself, occurred. Now, the other thing is oftentimes, and it's been described by, let's look at it this way. I think it's an indigenous creature, or at least it's been here probably as long as us. You got to figure there are over, according to the U.S. Geographical Survey, there's over 2,000 locations in the United States alone that have the name derived from the word Bigfoot. And there's over 100 tribal words which mean Bigfoot. We're talking about indigenous peoples that have been in this land, this country, for easily 2,000 or more years. They were there the whole time. They have stories. Like I said, I usually go to the native legend first. Then I go to the historical accounts. Then I go to the eyewitness reports. I want to get to the bottom of these things, but what I have found in my own research is I don't know that these things are intergalactic, if you want to say that. But as far as being interdimensional, even in the native legends, they talk about these doorways that open that are nothing but a blinding patch of light that they step through and they're gone. So the interdimensional aspect of it, I have heard literally in so many accounts as to why they can quickly disappear or appear, that yes, I do think they are probably interdimensional. They are certainly telepathic, but not because I'm a sensitive. They can talk to anybody.
I would agree with that 100%. 100% that Sasquatch is telepathic. As weird as that sounds, I would agree with you there. I want to get to another question here. Getting back to Lizard Man for a second, Galen is asking, has there been any evidence that Lizard Man lived in the past? Or is this a new creature over, say, the last few decades?
Well, if you think about it, Bigfoot was named by a reporter that was going along a logging trail and saw these immense tracks. Now, you also have stories. So you're talking about the 60s there. The skunk ape of Bishopville and in the southeast really came to the fore from a creature called the Fylth monster, Fouke, from Arkansas, and it was brought to public attention because of a man named Smokey Crabtree and a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek, which was absolutely based on the family's experience with this highly aggressive creature. It has been there, but it was kind of known after the regional area there in the Low Country there by the 1970s because of a film, and because of a newspaper man, we learned about Bigfoot, even though there are stories going back 100 or more years, there are accounts. This one I told you about from the 1830s. As far as the skunk ape, it wasn't really named until the early 90s because they let the lizard man name stick just because they didn't know what else to call it. But eventually, I saw the pictures. It was black, it was hairy, it had highly reflected eyes, and it was very demonic looking. But it's really the sort of thing that I think it's been there much longer. It's just that it came to public attention and fascination, and we are far more interested in superstition, myths, legends, anything leading up to it, and we're trying to dig to find the truth and the facts, which get lost when it hits the media. Lizard Man was not a reptile, but Honey Island Swamp Monster, another creature. This was Dana Holyfield's grandfather, Harlan Ford, was hunting with a friend. When he came up on a little dip and a little rivulet, looked on the other side, there was this gaunt, tall skunk ape, is what it amounted to. He gave chase to it, and he said, and all of a sudden the tracks just stopped. And she told me one time, literally on his deathbed, he said his only regret was that he had not looked up, which told me, you know what, it had 4 toes, it had 4 fingers. People think, oh, Bigfoot's a great thing, 5 fingers, 5 toes. This is something altogether different. His regret was the same one that those people accounted for in Lee County and Bishopville. This thing was facile enough that it could grab a branch and pull itself up and just climb and traverse through the trees. And all of them do that. And it's been around a lot longer than probably we have as even our forebears coming to this country. The Native Americans knew about these things long before, and they have stories going back generation after generation.
That is eerie indeed. Let's get to Bob's question. How do you protect yourself from other predators like bears and big cats if you enter the woods unarmed in order to meet up with Bigfoot?
I am not one of those guys.
I'm that guy. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I answer that question?
I wish you would, because I have no frame of reference. I am not going into the woods unarmed. And if you have to be armed, I'm not going into the woods with you.
You know what? I can honestly say I've done both. I never go into the woods alone. I always go with other people, and we are watching for absolutely everything. I'm not a good woodsman. I can tell you that right now. I'm not a good woodsman. I don't know the signs. I'm very weak, and it's something that I have to learn myself. However, if I'm with a group of people, I feel safe. And I don't think there's going to be much charging happening in regards to if there's 3 or more of us, if you know what I'm saying. But on the flip side, I do carry a knife just in case, and a big knife, much like the Crocodile Dundee, Paul Hogan back then. Oh, that's not a knife. Yeah, sure. I carry a big knife. But the whole idea is, from what I have heard from native legend up here, is Bigfoot can smell gunpowder. And if you want to make contact, keep the gunpowder away. Which is why when we go out, we do not actually carry a gun. But on the flip side, there are areas, and there's one area in about an hour and a half from my home, where there is a large contingent of Bigfoot sightings and evidence, but it's wrapped right in the middle of very big cougar territory and very big grizzly bear territory. Now, something like that, I would probably want to go in armed, and that's the reason why I haven't gone in there. It is safety first, but for the most part, if I'm with people, I'm not too worried about it.
I think you're in good company there. It's been offered to me to ride up the trail where this picture was taken of a dog man, one coming up a hill, the other actually kneeling or squatting. It has a tail. It's an odd thing. It looks like that demonic picture of that old lithograph of the, like a demon perched on a woman's chest, like a succubus or something, but impossibly long arms dangling out front of it, squatting, the foot upturned and not all the foot even on the ground, but even kneeling down, it was probably 4.5, almost 5 feet, because the Bodak tree splits evenly at 6 feet, and it was within 18 inches of that as it was kneeling down. Now, I'm sure I would have been safe, with this shaman, and this guy had actually worked as bodyguard for politicians and celebrities, things of that nature, and lived off to himself. He said he has to guard himself when he goes into those areas. It's not that I don't go off in the woods and do things, but I'm not one of those guys who goes out there and tries to imitate Bigfoot or smacks a tree or anything like that. And yet I can pick up the phone and call anybody. There was someone who had a similar situation with a Bigfoot in a family in North Carolina, who used to be an avid listener of the show when I used to host Artists First with Robert W. Morgan. And I put him in touch with somebody else who had the same kind of experience. And I have a tendency to be a bit of a clearinghouse. I never divulge or break confidence of the people who've told me these stories. Some of them work their way into my books. Some of them come after. I gave you a case in point where 6 months after I published Shadow of the Thunderbird, and I had just come to the attention of the college that wanted me to use my book and be author in residence for the critical reading curriculum. Basically, they took the book apart, which is what they were to do. Somebody gave me a call and said, "Would you mind if I called you later on this evening? I've had something happen, and I can't quite explain it, and maybe you can." And I said, "Sure, that'd be fine." I had no idea what he was talking about. Well, my theory of Thunderbird, which I do believe exists, is that it's a kind of prehistoric teratorn, a huge bird that was 6 feet tall, 11-foot beak to tail, and had a 25-foot wingspan. There's a famous photograph from the 1960s from the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles showing the silhouette and the curator standing next to it. They've only found a few bones, but they could reconstruct the size. This thing lived during the Miocene. It was a megafauna 40 million years ago. Well, this fellow called me that night, and I was kind of intrigued what he had to say. And basically, being a locked-wing flyer, as I believe him to be, you had the Gulf Stream coming from South America up the Mississippi River Valley to northeastern Ohio and southwestern Pennsylvania to the Black Forest region. Now you also have the jet stream, which tends to run along the border of the U.S. and Canada, that ends up in the same place. And from the 1840s, the Black Forest region there has been the hotbed of sightings of these giant birds. And it was where the actual photograph of the cowboys and the Thunderbird was actually taken and lost, which is what I covered in my novel. Well, the odd thing was this guy called me from Southwest Pennsylvania and said that he was a high school biology teacher, and it was 7:30 in the morning. They were dropping kids off, and this was 2003, so you didn't have camera phones, anything like this. But he said, I was sitting at the front of this line. He said there was a hedgerow at this T intersection, little building, little Quonset there where you had the trimmers, edgers, and the push mowers. And he said this man in brown, or what he took to be a man, he thought, until the first talon touched the asphalt. But he said this bird stepped out into traffic, into this open space at this traffic light. He said this thing had to have been at least 6 feet tall. He said, at the time he was driving a Dodge Durango, which, I'm about 5'9". I'm not that big, but anybody has to step up to this thing. This thing turned and looked at him through his windshield And for the course of the next 2 lights, it kind of walked around the circle. But I had the opportunity of speaking with him that night, interviewing him later, taking a transcript of it, interviewing him again after that, and I have the full account of it. It became the biggest known Thunderbird sighting in modern history. Stanley Gordon, whom I'm acquainted with, actually researched it up there. But this is how he described this bird, and he asked me what I believed it to be, and what I described was more or less, think the Lord of the Rings eagles. This is the size of the bird that actually lived, and you'd have what I kind of took Thunderbird to be. What he described, he said it was a cross between a pigeon and a penguin. He really had me there, but he said, yeah, it was about 6 feet tall, but 3/4 of it was parallel to the ground, like a pigeon's body, and the head kind of bobbed forward when it walked. It had a long, hooked bill that seemed to have almost like barnacles up at the top of it. He said the feathers were black and close, almost looking oily, and the odd thing was, he said it was a very powerful bird, very robust, very deep chest, but hardly any neck, hardly any legs. It's like the talons just came out from under the pelvis. But he said the wings were triangular shaped. They went straight up and came straight down. They weren't folded against the body like you would expect. And he gave me this account, and the odd thing was, again, he wasn't into cryptozoology. He tried the Philadelphia Zoo. He tried University of Pennsylvania, the local news station. He said, nobody could help me. And he said, at least you're listening and you're offering suggestions as to what this thing could be. I'd never heard of anything even remotely like this. But he said at one point it gave a little flap, and it flew about 10, 15 feet, but he said the wingspan was on this 2-lane roadside, curb to curb. And eventually, after space of 2 lights, where you had upwards to 150 people in buses and cars waiting there to go in the traffic, it gave one flap of its wings and wheeled over the trees and disappeared. And this was the account that he gave me. Again, I've got to put my website back up. I'm actually reworking it right now, but I've got the full account, and I've actually gotten other emails because I published this thing where people have described the same kind of creatures. So I hear from a lot of folks about the things that they've seen, the things they've experienced, and the things they've encountered. Some of it does make its way into the book, but partly what I'm doing is I'm putting down, because this is what a folklorist does, get as much of the truth as you possibly can and dispel the myth. And the odd thing is, and here is something else that will be unique for your listeners, just like Bishopville. Now, this corner, the southwest corner, Black Forest region of Pennsylvania, is only 10 miles from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, in 1966, 1967, 13 months, November to December, there was a flap of paranormal events unlike anything encountered in human history, where you had every kind of paranormal and supernatural and cryptozoological event going on. And the interesting thing about how all this came together for me was I came to the attention of Lauren Coleman because I had an artist rendering of the bird that I believe to be the Thunderbird, that I believe lived in the Black Forest region. This was actually in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, but just as Mount St. Helen is ground zero for the Bigfoot population, the Black Forest region in Pennsylvania is ground zero or home country for Thunderbird. And the case in point, this picture of this bird, I colored the entire bird black. It's a territor, which means that it's, if you've seen a vulture or a condor, its head lowers between its shoulders. I colored the whole thing black and the eyes red. And what you have when you do that is Mothman himself. Mothman was nothing more, not saying nothing more because it's still a paranormal supernatural event. Mothman was one of these birds. And some of the accounts of what these people had seen was, they said, It was a giant bird whose eyes reflected red in the moonlight when I saw it. And that's how these things overlap and the mythology grows. It wasn't something from ancient Egypt. I saw the movie. Lauren was the technical advisor on the Richard Gere movie. But it wasn't a psychological thing. People heard disembodied voices. They got phone calls in the middle of the night from loved ones who recently died, which was depicted in the movie. Men in black appeared all over the place. You saw flying saucers. You saw all kinds of cryptozoological creatures. But 13 months after those events was when you had the C-16 joint collapse and break on the Silver Bridge, because it was originally designed like a bike chain instead of cabled like the Golden Gate Bridge. The cars had gone from the early 1900s from weighing 1,500 pounds to weighing 3,000 to 4,000 pounds. Gridlock a couple weeks before Christmas. The bridge broke and 46 people died, lost their lives. But as soon as that happened, you never heard or saw Mothman again. And all of those events disappeared.
Only until recently in Chicago, in the Illinois area.
I've been hearing about that, and that's really the oddity for it, because they also said that it was seen around the area of Chernobyl before all the disaster there, and you wonder, because Chicago is such a hotbed, that when is it going to flare up and flow over? There's a film coming out about the Democratic National Convention in the 1960s when everything broke loose and Detroit all but burned to the ground and became the desolate place it is today. When is that going to happen to Chicago? Which my father's from Chicago, my mother's from Detroit. I'm from New England, which accounts for my heavy Southern accent. I do believe that that it was a precursor of things to come. That when people en masse see and hear things the way they do, nobody predicted the tragedy of what happened there, but it all ended once the tragedy occurred. And if it's a precursor, there's another word for it that I'm looking for. If Mothman comes just before a terrible event and disappears after, I did hear that a few weeks ago in some of the channels that he had been seen in the Chicago area. Now I'm thinking the bird, which does account for some of it, but certainly not why people's faces were scorched and why their eyes were red and capillaries burst by being in proximity to this thing that chased after their cars, because that's certainly not what even this bird in Pennsylvania had done, and not what a standard or a normal beast would do. So you have to worry and wonder for these people there, as they did in West Virginia all these years ago. But they have a conference convention, they have a festival every year. But they had the legend of an Indian that was supposedly killed that had to do with the birth of that legend. So again, you incorporate the indigenous legends into the historical accounts and then the eyewitness reports that come with it. They have that grain of truth, and that's where I come into as a folklorist.
We only got about 3.5 minutes before we got to go to break here. And I want to get in another question here. This one comes from BTO, and he is asking, Dallas, do you feel that the age of dinosaurs, thunderbirds, Sasquatch, and other species were giant humans existing as well, those who were 36 feet and taller during that time frame?
I do believe that. I am far more into prototypical humans because of Bigfoot and other creatures. I even believe that Dogman is prototypical human. I do believe that, I believe, first of all, the timeline is all wrong. Now that carbon dating is so readily available, what's happening is the timeline is being proved to be completely off kilter. They're finding actually soft tissue that they can test that's only 4,000 to 5,000 years old. Acambaro, there are 60,000 plus terracotta figurines, many of which depict dinosaurs that we didn't know the species of back when they were created back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and including the fact they used their tail for balancing and didn't drag it behind them, which is something we thought as recently as the 1970s. I do believe in the giant of Kandahar. I do believe that there are prototypical humans out there. And there's even a footprint in a rock that has to be millions of years old that shows a footprint that is 4.5 to 5 feet long. And there are reports all the time. There are more prevalent reports of giant humans and tiny humans than even of Bigfoot. It just has not captured the imagination because there are people, groups like the Smithsonian, that want to stifle the timeline and stifle the fact that we are not the prevalent and only human species on the earth.
I think there is a tie between. I just think there is something supernatural about this. And we can get more into that in the next hour, because I'm a firm believer that not everybody is a horrible photographer or videographer, that their film is always blurry. I don't get it. I have a good friend of mine down in Florida, Dallas. His name is Eric, and he has Bigfoot encounters around his cabin. And he has yet to get a picture of the creature. Yet every time he sets up a trifecta of trail cams, he gets orbs, or his cameras just happen to turn off and then turn back on when that happens. And he's a firm believer too. We're going to get more into the science and the creatures that we are chatting about tonight. Dallas Tanner is our guest, author extraordinaire of everything cryptid, because that's what he does. That's what he does. Hey, during the break, do me a favor. Go on to spaceoutradio.com. Go to our store. Check out the VIP passes for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon being held right here at 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. We will be holding this event September 29th to October 1st. We have speakers coming in to talk about aliens, ghosts, psychic ability, animal communication, UFO landings, Dogman, fairies, cryptids, so much more. A lot of people you've heard on this show, they're coming up to speak. We'd love to have you attend at 108 Mile Ranch, the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. It's going to be an amazing, amazing weekend. And the best part about it is we can all hang out together. I'd like that. I see all of you on the chat rooms. I want to see you all in person. So make sure you check it out tonight, because until July 31st, tickets are 10% off of your VIP passes. You'll be right back with us as we have hour number 3 of Space Out Radio with guest Dallas Tanner coming up right after this. Looking for a great weekend getaway this fall? Hi there, this is Dave Scott. Come on up to the heart of British Columbia for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon, being held at the Spruce Hills Spa and Resort in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Speakers from all over North America are coming to discuss Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and intuitiveness for the 3-day event, September 29th to October 1st. For more information, go to spacedoutradio.com and click on the Caribou Paracon banner and book your tickets today. Come to BC, where the paranormal is waiting for you.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Have you got your Cosmic Passport? If you need one, tune in to Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Weekend. This is Elizabeth Anglin, ET experiencer, spirit medium, and host of Cosmic Passport. Each weekend I'll be bringing you interviews and support from other paranormal experiencers, and the best in intuitive spiritual guidance from across the globe. It's all happening starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Time, midnight Eastern, on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4COP. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 mediums and a large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to anymore.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night and Sunday, while I am off in the wilderness finding my Zen and my Chi, in the cabin will be Uncle Jimbo James Tyson and Elizabeth Anglin for Spaced Out Weekend, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead, and those listening at the Spaced Out Radio Party at the West Georgia College. Thank you so much for joining us. I still haven't received an email from you guys, Dave at spacedoutradio.com. So that way we could chat after the show. I want to say hello to all of you. You better not stand me up. That would suck. That's okay, though. You can follow us on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Thank you so much for being with us for your nighttime entertainment. We are also on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Counter-immunoelectrophoresis. Counter-immunoelectrophoresis is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Connect with me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can tune us in on TuneIn, download this show and others on iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, Player.fm, and Stitcher. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can also visit our store, pick up a t-shirt, stickers, a poster, and you can pick up your VIP tickets for the first annual Spaced Out Radio Caribou Paracon being held September 29th to October 1st, that is, in 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia at the beautiful Spruce Hills Spa and Resort. We want to see you there. VIP tickets on sale now. They're 10% off until July 31st, so make sure you get your tickets while you can take advantage of the discount. Tonight we are talking with Dallas Tanner. He's a cryptid author, has so many stories that are just absolutely amazing. Dallas, welcome back.
Well, I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk. I call myself a folklorist rather than a cryptozoologist. I reached a point where I wasn't chasing anything. People were just offering to point them out, and on occasion I would take them up on it. And where I didn't, I know them to be credible, reliable, sober-minded people. And I do appreciate the chance to come and tell some of these stories. Some of them are actually more firsthand with regard to some of the experiences that we've had. As far as seeing directly things, not so much myself, but in the research that I have done and the things that I've uncovered, there's such a plethora material between the native legend, historical accounts, and eyewitness reports. I feel the trilogy. I call it a trilogy, the Cryptids trilogy. These books have been around probably 10 years now, I think. But between the three, I tend to be, I tend to write a lot of words. The books average 200,000 words in length. I'm going to break each of them into its own trilogy, so it doesn't feel so long. But we've talked about Shadow of the Thunderbird, which was my first novel and the one that brought me the attention of the college. Also, a major university used the book for their critical reading program. Track of the Bigfoot. Now, these books, my readers, I've got young readers. I go to elementary schools. I go to high schools. I go to colleges. I go anywhere and everywhere that I get the opportunity to talk about this sort of thing. They talk about the lack of sex language and violence. And, basically what I tell people is I try to put as much truth about the things that I learned and the things I know And anybody who writes in terms of Bigfoot being this ravenous creature that rends people limb to limb like any sci-fi channel would do with the Kensington Gore, or that Thunderbirds are going to drag you off and you're never going to be heard and seen from again, is missing the point. You know, they coexisted and cohabitated with people such that they became a part of their mythology, their legends. Things become myth when they are not seen. They become legend when people no longer believe in them. And there's so much truth and so much consistency between stories from 1,000 years ago or longer and the ones that happened 150, 200 years ago, and the things that are happening today, that that's what drove me, I think, more into stop saying, you know, I'm a cryptozoologist. These are known animals. They are known prototypical humans, and the people who had those experiences are the ones who told me about them. What we haven't talked about, I wrote my third novel, and the interesting thing about it, you know, I talked about not really being fond of going in deep into the woods and sleeping on the ground, that sort of thing, but I did my research for the cryptid that I used for my third novel. Loch Ness had been done to death. Lake Champlain, Ogopogo, other authors have covered them. I wanted something that was truly American, and because I live in the Southeast, has there been anything in the Southeast? And what I found was there is a creature that, a lake-dwelling animal that I received a little book on about a place called Lake Murray. Now, you need to understand 80% of the lakes are man-made through the TVA and other programs during the Depression to put people to work. But there's an animal that has been seen in these lakes and in these rivers and up and down the coast that has been so prevalent that I began to track its original history and could trace it back to the British Isles. Now, your folks in Georgia know about the Altamaha River. It's the river that is below Savannah. And it is the river that, according to history, that Jefferson Davis, at the collapse of the Confederacy, emptied the primary bank vaults in Richmond, and he went in an ironclad and turned upriver. Now, Clive Cussler said that ironclad went over to Africa, but in the account it says he turned upriver below Savannah. Now, that was the saving grace, if you want to get in the history of it real quick, is that Sherman didn't burn Savannah. When he threatened to burn Charleston, he burned Atlanta. He didn't save Savannah because he thought it was a beautiful city. He saved it because he knew he was close to the last of the Confederate payroll. And so he sent troops to try and capture the Altamaha Bridge and never could. And the thing was, no matter how much military soldiers and firepower he sent against the Altamaha Bridge, there was a bigger contingent waiting for him. These were men from what was called the Knights of the Golden Circle, and they were popularized in the second National Treasure movie. Now, if you know of Brad Meltzer and his show Encoded, he's another author that I came acquainted with. There are still descendants of the Knights of the Golden Circle guarding Confederate gold today. They will run you off. They will come up in a truck, and they're armed with semi-automatic weapons. Well, the interesting thing about my third novel and about this lake monster I wrote about is I had the same descriptions, dozens and dozens of them, come from lakes and rivers, the newspapers, the people who lived around them, particularly with the Altamaha River and a creature called the Altamaha. And the interesting thing about the Altamaha is it was the animal that Christopher Columbus, described as a mermaid. And the reason being was it had a trifurcated tail. Now, when you think of a whale has a split tail, a bifurcated tail. A trifurcated tail has a third piece in the middle that when it comes together, it's a spade shape. The interesting thing about this creature is it's a real and living animal that has not only been seen everywhere throughout the world. It accounts for the Loch Ness Monster. It accounts for Ogopogo. It accounts for Champ. it accounts for virtually every lake and river monster along that arboreal belt at that level of the parallel northward, but also in Florida, the lakes in the south where I've collected dozens of clippings on. And now, if you're brave enough to do it, I worked with an author, or excuse me, not an author, a dinosaur exhibit maker by the name of Rick Spears, who's very talented, works at the Fernbank Science Center in Atlanta. And through the interviews that I had with people who saw it firsthand, we drew the picture of what it looked like, because he came up kind of with his own concept. He was doing a statue for them, and I looked at the picture, and he said, I wanted to give it rough reptilian skin and a slitted eye and fangs. And I said, you're going to put this in the visitor center and tell people, come fishing, come boating. We got this in the river waiting for you. I said, no, let's just go with what people said. What they described was a pinniped. It was a type of seal that was actually the progenitor of the seal, the sea lion, the walrus, and the manatee. Only instead of hind flippers, its tail tapered to this trifurcated tail. It had no hind flippers at all. And its color was, think of the color of a boiled egg yolk. It was kind of a greenish on top and an oyster yellow on the bottom. But eventually the statue was made. Its actual size, it's 20 feet long, and it's at the visitor center at Darien, which is where 17 and 95 cross the Altamaha River. Exit 49, you can see the statue there today. But we went in research of that. I had a good friend take me upriver, and he became Angus Finnegan, the boat captain in my book. But this guy was a direct descendant of Trapper John Finley, who actually guided Daniel Boone, and he's a cousin to Kathy Bates, the actress from Misery. Interesting fellow. We went upriver because we were trying to find the source of the treasure. Reason being, the Knights of the Golden Circle would leave either carvings or etchings of animals in trees or in rocks, and that's where the lieutenants of the Knights of the Golden Circle would know to drop off or pick up this gold that was stored there. The theme of the book, or the story behind the book, is there are those who are looking for where the Tama Indians had actually done a statue of this creature called the Altameaha, which was their name for it. And if they could find where this animal goes to give birth, because it's always pregnant females and going upriver, and calves coming back with these female animals. I call them, I won't give you the species, but suffice it to say, they followed it. We followed upriver, and I mentioned Sherman. Sherman didn't burn Savannah. He was looking for a copperhead cemetery. It doesn't mean a cemetery with snakes. What it means is during the Confederate War, Democrats sympathetic to the South were called copperheads because of their support for the South. The Confederacy, they would wear a copperhead with a ribbon pulled through a hole, and they would wear it on their lapel. But when they died, they were not allowed to be buried in the North. They were taken south to what was called a copperhead cemetery. And Sherman was sure that it was somewhere around Savannah, which was another reason, why he was trying to take the Altamaha Bridge, because the last of the Confederate gold and wealth was being distributed to the soldiers, and he was trying to get to the payroll. I never knew that before. That was told to me by someone in the area. But the odd thing was, we went upriver. We came one day. We were there for about a week to this runoff, this fetid pond that had algae growing on it and a dead rabbit floating in it. And we just thought that it stinks. It was ugly. Ugh. But there was a dock, a pier on the other side of this pond. This was on the riverside. There were 3 people standing there. There was a man we called, basically described as haggard, big and tall, big bushy hair. and all he would do was laugh maniacally when we would talk to him. There was a lady with not a tooth in her head who would kind of pull at her greasy hair and rock back and forth like she'd never seen a man in her life, aside from her, the two men beside her on either side. The third one was a blonde-haired man, little tiny guy, always reminded me of the little Cletus character on Andy Griffin, and he did all the talking. He said, "You guys going to be here long?" And said, "No, we're not planning on it." I said, "Oh, good. You're welcome to go swimming or fishing if you want." I couldn't imagine. We did see dead fish in there. It was starved for oxygen. No, we weren't going in there. They said, "Well, the fishing's actually a little better, up a piece at the funeral there, up there at Bluegill Hill." And I looked, and I didn't see a hill, and I didn't see a cemetery. And I said, "What cemetery?" He said, "Oh, I forgot to mention, this is a runoff." He said, all of it's underwater now, has been for years and years. The odd thing about these people was it looked like they'd never seen a doctor, never had a formal education. They had little bits of piping and pallets and Confederate paraphernalia sewed into their clothing, and they were armed. And we said, "No, we'll go take a quick look, but we'll be on our way, and thank you." And they were nice enough because we weren't coming any closer. And they turned around, they left. We went up and we looked down. This was another 150 yards upriver on that side, but we looked down and saw this submerged cemetery with these concrete monuments and angels and tombstones. It was just a cemetery with these little fish swimming around it. And it got its name because he called it Bluegill Hill because it had bluegill fish in it, which have kind of a broad band across the forehead. Well, when we got done, we went back and we realized we had encountered some Knights of the Golden Circle. And they didn't seem to worry too much about us. We didn't see them when we crossed back and went back downriver. But I looked it up, and the bluegill is a type of bream or crappie, a little panfish, but its other name is the copperhead. And that we know to be the cemetery that Sherman did not burn Savannah for, and that he was trying to capture the bridge because the Confederate treasure was buried there. And what we had encountered were true Knights of the Golden Circle. 3/4 of that book, except for my alter ego's first-hand encounter of that lake monster, is absolutely 100% true. We had this magnificent adventure. When people described this animal to me, I said, "Did you catch a fleeting glimpse?" They go, "Nope." "What do you mean?" The pregnant females would pull themselves onto the sand and roll to cover themselves and sun themselves. And they'd say, "I got tired of watching after about a half hour, 40 minutes. There were over 100 fairly recent newspaper sightings of that local paper, of that creature. And I found the same thing everywhere. There's a guy in Florida, in Jacksonville. He won't take me to it, but has 40 hours of video footage of this animal. It lives, it breathes, it is the Loch Ness Monster, it is Ogopogo, it is Champ, it is every lake monster you can possibly imagine. People get fooled because of its greenish color into thinking it is a reptile. It's mammalian. It makes a hissing noise like a seal does. It leaves an oil slick of musk. You know, the smell and also the oils that come off its body. It is a true mammal, and you can see pictures of that statue of what that creature exactly looks like from over a dozen depictions that I interviewed and over 100 more that I just compiled the description of what it looked like. That artist did a magnificent job of showing what these people see and will not tell tourists about because they don't want to disrupt the experience or the birthing process of an animal that's been there since the days of Columbus and the conquistadors.
I want to switch gears here for a little bit because in the first hour, we had talked a little bit about the science in behind a lot of this research and that it is so different from state to state, province to province, and person to person. a lot of times what we see in the cryptid world is a lot of people giving theory as fact and as scientific fact, which I think is very dangerous. And in the other sense, we have a lot of scientists out there refusing to research these topics or these creatures, saying they don't exist without even looking at potentiary evidence. How do you feel as someone who looks into this when you have these two different groups aiming for the same thing, but really not doing the job of what science says to do?
I think it all boils down to the lack of sharing information. I kind of separated myself from BFRO and Texas Bigfoot Research Center, groups like that. I never really directly involved myself with any of them, although the TBRC, I love the people in it. BFRO, they brought some attention, I think much needed, to the people that have those experiences. I said something in Florida that got me flamed on a lot of sites. I said, science only accepts what it already knows. It doesn't want any information that's going to disrupt the model it's put together as to what it believes to be the timeline and the progression of what kind of animals lived and when they lived. This whole thing that they're finding living tissue now, and they're carbon dating dinosaurs that, lived 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. And Acambaro, I mentioned 65,000 terracotta figurines, and they show people in proper proportion beside dinosaurs astride them or using them as beasts of burden. If it doesn't fit, you change it to what you want it to be, like the whole thing about Gigantopithecus being Bigfoot. No, the largest true ape that ever lived did not change species, become bipedal and walk upright, and alter its appearance just to fit what they want the theory to be. Bigfoot is a prototypical human. Now, if you want to get biblical about it, being of Cain, read the description of what it says God did to Cain. Some people attribute to Mormons, say, oh, you're talking about blacks. No, I'm not talking about blacks. They're from sub-Saharan Africa. I'm talking about a man who was turned into the likeness of a beast, except around the eyes and the face. And if you look at the face in the picture, you know what? Again, the physiology and things of that nature. You got Jeff Meldrum, who I think is doing a wonderful job of trying to pull this together, and a man named Chillicut, who is a forensic scientist, CSI guy, who has looked at hair samples, things like that. I can out one creature in the science of it that I do believe unequivocally accounts for a legendary monster. You've heard about the Pangbok hand, and there's a monastery in Tibet that has, or toward Nepal actually, that has like this dried skin that supposedly came from a sagittal crest and the paw of a yeti. And what people don't realize is the word yeti from the Sherpas actually is yeti. Now they're very practical people. I'm trying to think. I think it's the Tibetan Mastiff is the most magnificent dog in the world. It is huge, and to get a purebred one costs you over $1 million. Its formal name to the Nepalese people should be left tied on a rope. That's what its name means. The word yeti means that over there. That's all it means. I don't know what it is. Well, there was a program kind of like what they did with Peter Jackson's King Kong, where they were in search of the Yeti, and they found above the 8,000, I think it was more like 10 or 12,000 foot level, they found hair samples from 3 different locations spread over an 800 square mile area. And they tested it. They checked the DNA. They went to a museum, and this individual was walking with the curator of the museum and said, well, yeah, we checked the DNA, and I wanted to show you what it was that people are thinking is the Yeti, the abominable snowman. And he stopped before this display case and said, there it is. Now, what people don't realize, they look beautiful and their cubs are adorable, but a polar bear, when it stands up, is 14 feet tall. You have no idea how tall 14 feet actually is, and yet there was a grizzly bear-like creature, much more massive than the polar bear that he was pointing to. He said, this is a Paleolithic bear that is still alive up there at that 12,000 plus foot level. He said, that's your abominable snowman. That's your Yeti. That is the science that was proved but did not get out because it doesn't meet the bipedal prototypical human explanation that at least the side that comes from, the field research wants you to believe the animal to be.
Let's get to some questions here from our audience. Trip is asking, has there ever been any First Nations indigenous cave paintings, rock art of any cryptids found in North America?
You know what? That is the odd thing about it. I would say, as far as artwork and things of that nature, not to my knowledge. The problem is it's always so interpretive. Even, when you think in terms of the hieroglyphs. But I cover petroglyphs and pictographs. Now, at Afton Falls, you've got the Piazza bird, which really induced me to write the story about the Thunderbird, which was a real chimera, and the name of the foundation in the book. But even though there are lots of oral traditions of it, there's no language, direct language, written language associated with a lot of these people. And they put a lot of symbols on a lot of things, but they really didn't do the stone-style paintings that we associate with, the Neolithic peoples like the Neanderthal or groups like that, like you'd find in the south of France. Now, the interesting thing is, let's just switch gears only momentarily. There was an account of a creature called the Beast of Govardhan that they thought was a loup-garou or a werewolf that killed over 100 women and children. There's a cave painting from thousands of years ago of what they call the sorcerer. I want your listeners to look up an animal, look up a museum-depicted creature like my friend Rick Spears would have done, of a creature called the Andrewsarchus. The Andrewsarchus is the animal that supposedly went into the water and became the whale. But the way that the Beast of Govardhan was depicted was the size of a bull, the aspect of a wolf with cloven hooves. Look at a picture of a recreation, museum style, of an Andrewsarchus. It is the size of a bull, it is the aspect of a wolf, and it had cloven hooves. There are animals that live to this day, prototypical humans that live to this day. I don't believe most of those traditions were oral. They were handed down. There was no written language. They really didn't do full-on pictures the way we'd like to think of it. More the cave people, the Neolithic people did it, but they have their stories. But that's really about all we have, and I really wish they had drawn more pictures. But the Shalish Indians bound the heads of their children and their own people to be more fierce in aspect, to be more like their angry brothers that they traded with, which are the Bigfoot population that was more prevalent and more open back in that era.
Let's get to another question here, this one from BTO. Dallas, do you feel through empirical and or spiritual personal evidence that extraterrestrials will merge out of the dimension if they are either extraterrestrial and or interdimensional civilizations?
It's funny you should say that. I like bringing things to the fore through fiction, and that's what I do. I picked a species for each of these. I hadn't really dealt that much with the idea of extraterrestrials, but I have had many people who have. I take everything as being natural. I think I believe and agree with Carl Sagan. It seems that the closer to death great scientists are, the more spiritual they become. One of his last statements was that it would be just as amazing if we were totally and completely and utterly alone in the universe as if we weren't and there were extraterrestrials. I do believe that, and maybe it's a little bit because of the Mormon faith I have, we do believe in transhumanism. We do believe that there were many worlds populated, that there were many Adams and Eves and Gardens of Eden, and they developed in accordance with not only the image of God, but also in development as to what it would take for them to survive. Now, people get evolution wrong. Evolution didn't say that you create new species. What it said is the fittest characteristics within a species enable it to survive. And I think that's the nature of things and why, you have species today. Now, let me just I hope I answered the question there. I do believe spiritually in the idea of life on other planets. I do believe that we are being visited, but I also, and this just points to a story that I just finished, my first novella in 7 years, called Aurora. There's a man named Nikola Tesla who didn't get he didn't get any of the credit he should have for his contributions. But in 1899, he received transmissions from something called the Black Knight that has been in polar orbit for 13,000 years. And as a result of that, he went from generating AC power to wanting to harness the power of the Earth. And I believe it was for the sole purpose. Once we reach that level, it's like they depict in Star Trek. When you have the warp drive, you can travel among us. And I believe that his harnessing of the Earth's electromagnetic field to free us from those who would basically enslave us for communication, electrical power, things of this nature, when that happens, I do believe they'll have reason to come, because if you look at it, Tesla had a patent for a gyroscope for powering and flying airships independent of the Earth's surface. He has a spaceship that was utilized and developed during the 1940s. One crashed in Roswell, and it is a terrestrial thing, but he believed in extraterrestrials and gained knowledge from them that he applied and has been hushed up since and not utilized except by HAARP. If you ever look up and see a chemtrail, look up HAARP and find out why they want to control the weather the way that they do. But that's where all of that comes from. That was their gift to him, and it has been squelched. They don't want that contact and that communication, or even say that they exist, although they've been able to retro-engineer, and not even have to retro-engineer. They have the technology that he developed that allows for electromagnetic flight in a disc-like object. There are pictures online you can see that he drew and developed because he has patents, part of what the government stole from him, and that's my novella.
Trip is asking, have you ever ran into any situations where people have seen or had interaction with gnomes? And I preface that because every damn show he has to bring up the gnomes, and he knows I hate gnomes. He knows I do. Because now this is going to start a big, big swath of gnome photos coming in every chat room now.
I can't blame him for that at all. Let me tell you what my philosophy is on that. Essentially, think of the story or the film Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Came out in the 1960s, and what people don't realize is it points to a lot of the myth and the legend for the historical side of things as to what they are, where they came from, why they're here. The little people. Angels were purported to be these ethereal, almost magical beings that you couldn't see. They were there, they could interact, you could hear them, they would move things, they would do things, but you didn't see them. Well, the explanation to these practical superstitious folk back in the day was it's not that they're invisible. It is that they are so small you can barely see them. And so the elves were not the elves of Finnish legend that Tolkien incorporated into the Lord of the Rings, these tall, fair, wise people. They were mischievous little imps that were a foot tall or a little less. Now, the interesting thing about it, and the reason that I say that it involved a lot of country legend, is this is the interesting thing. Look at the stills from it. Look it up online. Everything that I say gets proved, either if I make it up as I go along or discover it or not. Darby O'Gill is talking to the king, and I don't know that they called themselves gnomes or elves or what the name was. I thought it was gnomes. But Darby O'Gill is sitting on a gilded throne with his arms on the gilded or golden wings of cherubim that are facing away from each other. What you need to realize is, and the implication of the angels there, he is sitting on the Ark of the Covenant. They are guarding one of God's treasures on earth. So as far as the little people, I've heard a lot of stories about them. I do believe in prototypical humans. I know that with the Homo florenses, up until the 1930s, in the area of Papua New Guinea, when they had a funeral for one, there are people that are not pygmies. They're homunculuses. They are perfectly formed, but 2.5 to 3 feet tall. You've got these giants like the giant of Kandahar, where a military troop had to go do recon after a squad disappeared, and they supposedly shot and killed, eventually, a 14-foot-tall man. You've got the Grand Canyon, where someone fell through a shaft into this subterranean city, basically, went on for miles and miles with these 8-foot-tall chairs. Do I believe in gnomes? The prototypical humans are very small. They can be very large. So I think, yes, there's a strong possibility that they do exist. But look up that reference to Darby O'Gill, and that's where the idea of the elves came from, that they were just small, that angels were tiny, and that's why they could do what they do, and why Hans Christian Andersen always had them making shoes and doing good for people. It wasn't that they were invisible or winged. They were just too small to be seen.
I still don't like them. I'm not going to lie. They scare the daylights out of me. You know?
I don't blame you.
Yeah. They're just, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. I really don't know what to say about it. You know? What I do want to ask you is in regards to another story that you have recently covered. We're going to step into the paranormal here for a minute, about a little boy.
Yes. I'm called on often, again, when things happen that are unusual and out of the ordinary. People don't know where to go or what to do, and they call on me. Again, I'm a folklorist. I don't chase to exploit anything of that nature. My book sales will tell you I'm not here to exploit. But I've had a bestseller or two, and I came to the recognition of a local franchise that owned several restaurants, part of a major corporation. They contacted the corporation because they had something unusual going on that they couldn't account for. And they asked me to go and take a look at it. And I wasn't sure what I was stepping into at that time. That's when I made the transition to, like I said, more prototypical humans than mythological or legendary animals, because I came to the realization Bigfoot was prototypical, skunk ape was prototypical, dogbear was prototypical. These were not animals. They might be barbaric or what. But anyway, I went to this restaurant, and again, I've never divulged the name of it or its location, but it's the title of this novella that I'm working on now, a little figure I came to call Little Boy Blue. The reason I call him that is I went in, I sat down, ordered myself a soft drink, and one by one I had these employees, from the manager on down to the workers, come down and tell me the strange things that have been happening, including pots and pans flying off their hooks and banging on the big those steel vents that they've got to catch all the grease smoke. And it seemed to be something to it, even the man who brought me there. And I had myself a couple of apps that I use for such things. One I call the tricorder. It picks up everything going on around me. It's because of the magnetometer in the iPhone that this app I can trust and believe it. The other one works exactly the same way, but what it does is it filters out all of that ambient stuff, whatever's left over. Those are the pockets of strange energy, strange temperature, cold spots, warm spots, whatever it happens to be. And I swear by these apps. Anyway, after the lady talked about this little boy that they've been leaving a Happy Meal sort of thing out for, it's not McDonald's, it's a kid's meal. What they would do is leave it at night, but they did everything in the world they could to try and dispel what they thought, might be a reflection, might be just, some bleeding over. And I said, what are you talking about exactly? He said, well, this booth you're sitting in, come on, just come back in the security booth with me. And these restaurants keep these cameras going because you never know when someone's going to say they slipped on mop water or the coffee was too hot or whatever. Again, I swear, not McDonald's. Something a little more regional for the South here. But I looked at the security camera, and lo and behold, I saw a little boy standing up in the booth looking back toward the kitchen. And I said, isn't that where we were just sitting? Yeah, he's been there the whole time. You can't see him, but for some reason, we can see him in our security camera. And I said, when did this start? And at the time, this was about 3 years ago, they said, the last 6 months, I guess. We've got recordings every 6 weeks. It starts over and records all this stuff. But they had weeks and months, and now years of footage of this little fellow. And I went out with my apps, and I ran the first one. And I went back 2 or 3 times. And the odd thing was the one app, it's strange because it can pop up single words. But the words popping up were like mine, table, go, things where he was possessive. But I was talking to this man, and the first word that popped up was soldier. He was talking about being a veteran. Well, I left. I came back several times, and he was not there during the day. He was there during the evening. And what I discovered was one night I was there, and precisely at 8:30, directly over my head, the HVAC kicked on, HVAC, because I wasn't picking up anything. The ambient energy level, the electrical field there was very low. But when this generator kicked on for the air conditioning, the lady behind the counter at the security desk in this little room off the side said, there he is, I see him. And everything flew off the wall as far as not pots and pans, but the energy level went up. There was enough energy for him to manifest himself. And that's where I came to the conclusion, because I called Little Boy Blue because he looks like the boy in the painting. He's all blues and grays. He had a page boy haircut. I did not move the camera in any closer because it was a little unnerving. I had someone go out one night and just pass his hand through him, and it looked like someone had put their hand in blue water. Where others described a cold spot when they put their hand over to where he was, I felt like tingling, like I had hit my funny bone. Well, after that, I hadn't gone back for probably 6 months. It had been closed for a time. They were refurbishing it. You know how a lot of these boxy ones were more like shotgun. They were longer to accommodate drive-through and less inside traffic. And I went back, and I was asked to go back. They said he's upset. And I said, why is he upset? Well, we don't see him anymore. Well, how do you know he's there? Trust me, we know he's still there, but he's not happy with us. And there'd been some of the tossing and whatnot. There'd been other things. There was a little dark-eyed girl. This old version restaurant still had the little bell when you ran over like the old style gas station, sometime that bell would go off and people would look out the window, see nobody, and look down, and this little dark-eyed girl with a basically a Civil War era dress and the big black curls would be looking up at them. He did eventually give us his name. The words Master and Dan came out when we asked what his name was through this app. Now, what I didn't realize was, and someone had to explain to me because I'm one of those damn Yankees that never went back north, that the families of rich people in the South during the antebellum days, directly before and just after the Civil War, referred to their children as Master and Mistress. So Master Dan was the little guy's name. Well, I went back, and sure enough, because of the reshaping of this restaurant, they had moved the HVAC to where it was no longer over his booth. And when the HVAC kicked on, there was not enough of an electrical field for him to manifest himself. And I held out my phone, and when it calibrated, got rid of all the ambient light and everything, I saw one little flicker where I'd seen the strong red ball there before directly in front of me, just a little yellow flicker that went out. And I'd spoken to him, and this was the first and only direct contact that I had where he was answering in the conversation style, where it wasn't just one-sided. And I said, well, he initiated the conversation. The word Ben popped up. I said, well, it's been a while since I've been here. Yeah, it's been closed. I said, have you been here the whole time? The word mostly appeared. And then I looked, and when that little flicker happened, I said the same thing I always say to him. I see you. And the last word, and I have got it in the log on my phone, on that app, came up, lie. He knew he could no longer be seen. He was upset about it, but he wasn't going to give up his table to go to another so that he could be in front of that HVAC. So, and that he knew that wouldn't help him because it was not covered by the security camera. So what I'm doing in this novella, I'm writing nothing but the facts, but I'm giving him a happy ending. In it, someone like me who's an author, a folklorist that's an associate professor at a local college, goes out and makes the acquaintance of this fellow. All of this happens to him. I know he's there. I hear about him on a weekly basis because he makes himself known. What I do is when they ripped out that security camera and put in something other than the infrared they had before, there was not even the means to see him. My alter ego, my character, what he does is he takes a compressor, a small generator, fires it up, puts it in the back of his truck, goes there, asks if he can have the old equipment, because there's a house near us that I always say to people buy and sell because they get tumors from the big generator and the big power grid that passes right over it, that my character buys that house, and there's a man putting that security equipment that this one store gave him and hooks it back up and looks through it and says, I didn't know you had kids, because outside, little boy Blue and his sister, which is who we come to know her to be, are outside playing, and that's the happy ending I want to give him. But I can tell your listeners, the corporation asked me to go there. They asked me not to say anything about it. I haven't. But this little guy is my friend, and if there was any way possible I could do it, I would love to give him that happy ending. And I want to make sure that he knows where possible I would do that for him. He did get in the back of the car of one of the managers one night, but he couldn't leave that place. And he vanished just as soon as she pulled out of the parking lot. They're finer matter, finer energy, and that's what a spirit is. We are all batteries. We're all a magnetic field that when we lose the shell, we still exist. It's not a spiritual thing. It's a matter of metaphysics and fact that we just happen to be inhabiting these bodies during our mortality. Not reincarnation, but there's a reason for us to be here. When we lose these bodies, some people lose their way, and that's little boy Blue.
Do you enjoy dealing with the paranormal, considering you mainly focus on writing about cryptids?
Well, I do. Well, I'm also into conspiracy theory. I happen to be doing a project for the government on 9/11, witnessed some of that firsthand. I write about other things as well, and even my books go into the technology. It goes into the science. I have the Cryptids trilogy, but I also wrote a novel that, when I tried to get a little elitist, 240,000 words long, I got a little sickened by Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. Reason being, all of that hinged on the fact that in 1955, a man basically forged a document that would have put him in line as the King of France as the last of the Merovingians. And he put it into the National Archives. Now, they caught him, they arrested him, but that is what became the Da Vinci Code. I wanted to tell the truth about what I knew the Da Vinci Code to be. I know what the Grail is. I know it from the Apocrypha. I know it from the Bible. I know it from history. I know the history of the Templars. And let me just tell you very quickly there. The Templars believe that, they talked in National Treasure, the first movie, how 18 ships disappeared on that October Black Friday in 1308 to escape accusations of heresy by King Philip, who didn't want to repay a debt he owed. The anti-pope living in France at the time would not condemn them as heretics. The Catholic Church never did that. But they went seaward. Now, they didn't take treasure as we know treasure to be, but they did collect it. They took ossuaries. They believed, in the Da Vinci Code, when it talks about these caskets are empty, they are. The only thing that actually lives beyond, our mortal frame, like even when we're cremated, our skull and our thigh bones, our femur, are the only thing that lasts. So they had a flag with a skull with a pair of thigh bones crossed beneath it on a red silk field that they called the Pretty Red. Now, the Pretty Red in French is the Jolly Rouge. When they set out to sea, they learned their way around the world and navigated, went everywhere. They went to Malta and took on these men, and they had to learn to live at sea by robbing other ships. They became pirates. They anglicized. They said, we're no longer Templars. We're no longer the Pretty Red. And they put that field instead as black instead of red. You had the skull and crossbones. They didn't call it the Jolly Rouge anymore. They called it the Jolly Roger. And Edward Teach, Blackbeard the pirate, believed himself to be the last Templar. I got slammed for it, but you know what? All I did, a year later, National Geographic put out an article referencing me, and I plugged it into that review that gave me 1 star because I didn't know what I was talking about. So yes, I love researching everything. Nikola Tesla is my latest.
And that could take you down a whole different rabbit hole. Quickly, because we only got about a minute left with you here, do you think that Nikola Tesla was human? Or a lot of people believe he might have been alien? What do you think?
I believe he was human, but I believe he was influenced by extraterrestrial technology. Look up the Black Knight. Look up, in 1899, he received transmissions that he claimed he couldn't decipher. And yet, afterwards, his work changed from building these massive generators and creating, instead, using the Earth as an electromagnet, that he built this tower called Wardenclyffe. Now, Edison, there's the current wars is coming out this summer, or this fall, I think, with Edison versus Tesla. But J.P. Morgan and Edison took away his equipment, and yet in 1908, he told Admiral Perry, watch, I'm going to tickle the lights of the Aurora Borealis to prove to you what it is I can do. And he set a beam up that did that. In Northern Europe, they had the most incredible light show ever. And yet the next day, there was a massive explosion of 800 square miles, 800,000 trees, whole herds of deer in Tunguska that died as a result of this beam that he used. He was able to send that beam anywhere and affect the weather and affect the seismic aspect of the ground, everything. And just real quick, The chemtrailing is to ionize the air because HAARP uses Tesla's technology taken when he died, and they can do anything with the weather. And the weather has been strange. New South Wales in Australia got one of these HAARP stations. They're getting weather cyclones and things they've never seen before. But that's where all that conspiracy comes from.
Dallas, I got to shut this thing down. Thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you back on, my friend. We'll do it very, very soon.
I would love it. If I can volunteer and help to grow your listenership. We covered about 2% of what I've got inside this thick head of mine. And I do put it out as fiction, but only to safeguard and ensure that those stories do not get lost. And the people are real, the events are real, and I appreciate you and your listeners, and anything I can do to help, call me back whenever. I'm always going to be available to you.
I appreciate that. I'm going to wrap this thing up. Tomorrow and Saturday or Sunday, we have Uncle Jimbo James Tyson, Elizabeth Anglin in for Spaced Out Weekend. I'm going to deal with Willie tomorrow night, Willie the Ghost, at my tour. Otherwise, I'm out for the weekend. I'm going to find my Zen, my Chi, my bag is packed, and I am heading out. Remember, do us a favor, tell a friend, because together we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home.